For most people in the world, you probably don't know a whole lot about politics in Norway, but I wanted to talk a little bit about it today because I think it's a strange situation. In most places of the world, when we think of a conservative government, we have a general idea of what their principles and what their ideas for how the government and society should be run. And if someone identifies as more liberal, we generally understand what their politics are going to be. However, it's almost flip-flopped and very mixed in Norway, and I wanted to talk about it. And then for if there's any Norwegians listening, towards the end of the video, I'll talk about what I think the future of Norway is going to be as it relates to Europe as a whole. First things first, Norway works in the framework of a parliamentary representative democratic constitutional monarchy under King Harald V. Executive power is exercised by the King's Council, the cabinet, led by the Prime Minister of Norway. Legislative power is vested in both the government and the Storting, elected within a multi-party system. The judiciary is independent of the executive branch and the legislature. Currently, the Prime Minister is incumbent Ernest Solberg, after winning the position in 2013, and with the sort of center-right coalition was able to maintain power in 2017. So let's look through the biggest parties and the coalitions that currently exist within Norway. The largest in seats, the largest single party, is the Labour Party, with 30% of the seats, led by Jonas Gahr Støre, and they are social democrats who believe in a welfare state but allow for some privatization of industry. This comes in the wake of the economic liberalization of the 80s that happened in a lot of Western countries, and they're much in the fashion of Tony Blair and the New Labour Party. And they're also a part of the Party of European Socialists and also take part in the Progressive Alliance. So when you think of this party, think of, and this is for Americans, think of the Democrat Party, but generally made up of only the more progressive of them. So we take out neo-liberals and corporate liberals and things like that out of the Democrat Party, and you have the Norwegian Labour Party. Now the next biggest single party is the Conservative Party, which is led by the Prime Minister, Ernest Solberg. And what's interesting here is that we understand conservative parties that live within a certain framework of political ideas. But this Conservative Party in Norway is a liberal conservative party. They are center-right. So they do things like promising tax cuts, which they've done, stricter immigration rules. They're very pro-individual rights. And they've defined themselves as a conservative party of progress. So we're talking welfare and gay rights, as opposed to cultural, social conservatism. And the Conservative Party is supported by the Liberal and Christian Democratic Party. And they're surprisingly pro-European Union, but they don't see it really as a priority. This I would almost consider something like the new right in the United States, one that is more secular than the old GOP kind of conservative Republicans. So they're very much in favor of individual rights and some social conservatism, but they don't want it enforced through the state. So they're not quite libertarians. They're somewhere between Republican and Libertarian. That's where they sit. Now, the next single party is the Progress Party, led by Siv Jensen, the current Minister of Finance, strangely enough. And this party identifies more as a classical liberal or libertarian party, and they've also been called conservative liberal. And some detractors have described them as a neoliberal populist movement. And they, of course, coalitioned with the Conservative Party to win in 2013, and so on. And I would consider this group very similar to the Big L libertarians in the US. They are very similar to the Libertarian Party in a lot of ways. The sort of idea that we should let the gay couple protect their weed farm with their guns, that type of very socially liberal but fiscally conservative kind of thing. Now, it's not perfect. None of these are perfect. Like I said, this is a strange situation. The Progress Party does, however, advocate for more public spending on infrastructure, mainly from the profits of the oil industry. They do seek more strict immigration laws and are pro-globalization, as in the market. And they also oppose Norway joining the EU. So, strange enough, you have the Conservative Party, which is pro-European Union, but does not see it as a priority. But then you have their coalition partners, the Progress Party, that are opposed to joining the EU. And in the Progress Party, you have stricter immigration laws, but they are pro-globalization. They want to spend less in general, but then spend more on public infrastructure. It's a very kind of flip-floppy. I don't think they're working from first principle, but then again, most mainstream political parties do not. The other idea that you could have is say, if you're comparing them to the Big L Libertarian Party in the United States, they're simply posturing for political traction in the mainstream. So not all of their principles are able to be applied in the current political structure. That would also be something that could happen. My last thoughts really here are the strangest part is that they're called the Progress Party, which I guess if you're progressing towards more libertarianism, I guess that's one way to look at it. But when Americans and many other people in the world hear the word progress, they think leftism. They think some kind of socialist organization like the Labor Party. But strangely enough, they're self-described almost like libertarian classical liberals. The next part of this sort of center-right coalition, which is very strange considering how this party is the Christian Democratic Party at 5.6%. And they're led by Newt Arnold Harride and the People's Christian Party. That's, I think, literally what their name translates to. And when you hear the People's something party, you generally think leftism, right? Now, this is a party positioned as a family-friendly party. They're founded on the basis of Christian morality and Christian cultural issues. However, they are considered a centrist party, but they combine social conservatism with left-leaning economic positions. And this is a complete flip-flop from the Christian voting bloc, I think pretty much anywhere else in the world outside of Scandinavia and some parts of Western Europe. In the United States, they have social conservatism and right-leaning economic positions. But then you have some people who are liberal, socially liberal, and then conservative economically. I know it might sound strange, but it's almost like a Christian communist movement. It's very odd to me how they can combine social conservatism with left-leaning economic positions. It's usually the other way around. So let's kind of talk about the other seat holders. You have the Center Party, the Liberal Party, the Socialist Left Party, and the Green Party, and everyone else is below 1% representation, so I don't think they actually hold any seats. So let's look at the 2017 election. Now, please correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, because it is still relatively new to me, so any Norwegians want to correct me, please do so. So the center-right coalition was made up of the Conservative Party, the Progress Party, the Christian Democrats, and the Liberal Party. And together they serve as a 52.8% majority, which is an actual majority. Hooray! No split parties, as in like the Netherlands. And then the sort of leftist socialist coalition is the Labour Party, the Socialist Left Party, the Red Party, and the Green Party. And I believe that their seats make up a total of 38.8% of the seats. So they are pretty far off from having a majority coalition. So now we're going to get into what I think is the future of Norway, and it's very strange. Like I said, this whole situation is kind of odd to me. I would have to spend some time interviewing locals who live there in order to make a better understanding of this, because everything seems kind of upside down to me. You know, you have the Liberal and the People's Democratic Republic of Christianity, you know, in a coalition with the Conservative and the Progress Party. That all those names and what they stand for seems kind of flip-floppy. The sort of Labor Socialist coalition makes a little bit more sense, but they're losing support as far as I can tell. And so let's talk about, because since I have been for a long time anti-socialism, anti-leftism, and these sort of red parties, I want to talk about the change in Norway. As far as I can tell, there seems to be a shift in the left versus right, and majority center-left, center-right. So looking at historical data of voting power and how many seats they hold, the leftist coalition kind of has been fluctuating up and down in a wave, depending on, I think, how the economy is performing. So, of course, when the economy is doing bad, you get more socialists. When it's doing good, you get less socialists. So, it's pretty typical, but in the United States, we can definitely see that there is a new wave of right-wing think that is coming up. And I'm not sure if it's the same in Norway. I heard that in the rural communities, much like the rest of the world, they are more conservative than the urban populations. But of course, in a country as small as Norway, that rural population is going to greatly lose their voting power if the urban areas get any larger and any more leftist. So if we look at the tax rate, the personal income tax rate, like I said, correct me if I'm wrong, but it has been lowered to 38.52% from 40%. So the Conservative Coalition is doing some positive things there. However, this Conservative Coalition is also passing things that we would generally consider progressive leftist socialist, like the equality legislation that they're passing to help women and minorities so-called break the glass ceiling or bridge the gap between native Norwegian men. It's very strange why they would think that way. And it's not all of them. It's, of course you can't box, all political parties into one thing, but it does seem strange that they had enough support to pass equality legislation while at the same time lowering taxes and increasing something like offshore drilling. That would be the exact opposite, I think, in the United States. If you have a progressive party that's passing equality acts in the legislature, then they would not be in favor of lowering taxes and closing off immigration, and also they would not be pro offshore drilling for energy needs. So this is this weird kind of situation you've got going on there. So if there's one thing you have to understand about Norway, and this is from my perception as an outsider, the whole reason why Norway is as successful as it is today is not only because it is a highly exclusive, high intelligence, high trust society, but man, they have a shitload of oil over there, and it accounts for revenues of over $40 billion. It's the second largest exporter of oil outside of Saudi Arabia. That's pretty damn big. So that's a pretty large part of your economy, and I understand that. I live in an oil town. We depend on this type of thing. So if I was to say anything about the future of Norway, you need to maintain this economy as much as possible while shifting the rest of your economy to something else, because obviously, oil's not going to last forever. There is going to be either a shortage now or another drop in the global oil prices, and you don't want to end up like Venezuela, of course. So keep the socialists out of your government, because not only are they going to restrict this oil industry, but they might even shut it down completely, as in something like France. Macron is not very pro-oil in any way, shape, or form, but France does not have the same oil industry as Norway does. But keep the socialists out that are advocating for the destruction of one of, if not your greatest economic powerhouse. It's what makes Norway so incredibly rich, even in comparison to the United States. Now, of course, this is purely for economics. Your energy production, I believe, is largely from hydropower, which is great. That solves one issue. The United States is very reliant on non-renewable resources just to get our energy needs, because we're so fucking huge of a country, but that's something else. Also, you got to realize that Norway imports more than half of their food needs. So you need to start switching your economy to either be more self-reliant or keep socialists who are against this oil industry out of power. So let's talk a little bit about socio-cultural issues. In the past, I don't know if it's true today, but Oslo was considered the crime capital of Scandinavia. There was a ton of theft and sexual assault and things like that in Oslo, and this was going back all the way to 2012, 2013 when I first looked into it. And during that time, they did a study in 2017 looking at that time period, and the proportion of foreign-born perpetrators of criminal offenses age 15 and older at a per 1,000 residents, and it was found that criminality was the highest among immigrants from South and Central America at 164 per 1,000, Africa at 153 per thousand, and Asia, including Turkey, at 117 per thousand. And it was lowest among immigrants from Eastern Europe at 98 per thousand, other Nordic countries at 69 per thousand, and Western Europe outside the Nordic region at 50 per thousand. And you also have to look at 37% of their prisoners are foreigners. And we're looking at places from Kosovo, Afghanistan, Iraq, Somalia, Iran, Lithuania, Morocco, Turkey, Chile, Eritrea, and so on and so forth. And that's in order from largest to smallest. And foreigners, they found, especially from Afghan and Somalia, are highly overrepresented in sexual assaults. And this is true for the rest of Europe as well. But most people don't want to recognize this fact. So to all of the Norwegians out there, think about these types of things. When you're doing elections in the future, think about the conservative coalition versus the socialist coalition. I've always advocated against socialism because it will degrade your society. Even if your conservatives are pro-welfare, so long as they keep exclusive and maintain that sort of in-group preference that Norwegians and everyone else should have, I think you're going to be safe. Norway is one of the safest countries in the entire world, but it will only get worse as more and more of these foreigners come into your country. As just looking at the statistics, you can try and bring in the best and brightest from these countries, but they're still going to be overrepresented in crime. So do you really want them there? Not only are they bringing in a foreign culture, a foreign religion and ideology, but they're bringing in crime. I mean, Norway is one of the safest places in the entire world. They're one of the highest trust societies, one of the most intelligent societies, and they're bringing in people who are the exact opposite of that. Why? Why are you allowing these people into your country? I don't understand. If you look to your neighbor to the east, Sweden, I mean, they have grenade attacks, acid attacks, sexual assault at such a high rate that Malmo is the rape capital of Europe. They have constant fear to go outside in some places, especially in the large cities, because they have brought in a foreign population that is going to tear down the fabric of their society. And here's my main point, is that if you allow this to happen, there will be a tipping point where the average Norwegian is affected by these people, and they will speak out, and then it will turn violent. We want to try and avoid this violence, but it is going to get that way. Sweden is already thinking about deploying soldiers on the streets of their major cities to combat the amount of attacks that are going on from these foreigners. So you have to understand, do you want to virtue signal and get more foreigners in your country and then have to deploy the military on the streets? You don't want to end up like some places in Africa, even some places in the United States where our police are almost a sort of pseudo military force because there's so much crime caused by these non-Europeans. What is the future that you are going to choose? Are you going to continue to be a world economic powerhouse, one of the wealthiest countries? Will you continue to be one of the safest countries in the world? Will you continue to enjoy Norwegian culture and religion and language? Or are you going to flush it down the toilet and let these godforsaken leftists, socialists take over and destroy everything? So hopefully there is a bright future for the youth in Norway. After the Utøya massacre that happened, there was a surge in youth support of socialist political movements, and I hope that has since changed. It would appear that the socialist parties gain and lose support in a wave, so it's kind of almost random depending on how well the economy is doing, but hopefully we don't have to get to the point where there is violence in the streets every single day and that people start to have to fear for their lives. If there's any Norwegians out there who would like to talk about their experiences with these types of things, please let me know. I'd love to talk about it. And thank you for listening.